Yeah, similar to the first question. This is from Lisa. How would you suggest beginning to write poetry? I pick up the pen and just stare at the blank page.
We have this strange misunderstanding that somehow I'm going to find the part of me that knows exactly what to say. Yeah. And strangely, it's almost exactly the opposite. We have to find the part of us that doesn't know what to say, that hasn't a clue. Yeah. That's the part that will speak. Yeah. That's why poetry is so bloody difficult to write, actually, to begin with. It's the part of you that feels as if it doesn't deserve to have a voice. Yeah. And so finding that physical place. I remember when I first started writing poetry myself, I was just trying to get the sounds right on the page, because I knew narrative. If I tried to write narrative, it would be, I mean, Coleridge said no poet begins in philosophy, or they write very bad poetry. Yeah. But every poet becomes a philosopher. Yeah. So I was just trying to get the images and the sounds right on the page, and I knew once I'd done that, I'd be able to start to bring in narrative, a building story into it. So, for instance, one of the first poems in that line that were in Songs for Coming Home is this: horses moving on the snow. Through the damp grass around the house, there are horses moving on the snow. In the half-light, they move quickly, following the fens until the mist takes them completely. In the damp grass around the house, through the damp grass around the house, there are horses moving on the snow. In the half-light, they move quickly, following the fence until the mist takes them completely, and evening is the hollow sound of hooves on the south field. And evening is the hollow sound of hooves on the south field. Well, those horses ran past the open French doors of the place I was writing at the time, a place called Spring Valley Farm on Whidbey Island here. They galloped through the snow about probably 9 o'clock in the morning. And it wasn't until 4 o'clock in the afternoon that I had that moment, on the page. It took about 5 or 6 hours of working to get language out of the way, to be able to say what had actually occurred in that moment. Through the damp grass around the house, there are horses moving on the snow. In the half-light, they move quickly, following the fence until the mist takes them completely, and evening is the hollow sound of hooves in the south field. So somehow those hooves were still reverberating even into the evening when I finally got the line that spoke it. But it was just trying to get that sound, trying to get the image. So the writing of poetry, to begin, it's something very, very simple inside you. It's so simple, it takes the kind of breakdown to actually fall towards it.
Oh, right. Yeah. Beautifully put. Yeah. I mean, I was just thinking at the last part of what you were saying, and what a marvelous poem, by the way, that the sound, they've gone and the sound is still there, and that's the evening. It's fantastic. But there's been one of the things that's happened around Zen in the last 50 years is that it's it had a great influence on American writing.
Exactly.
And it was, I mean, it was a beautiful thing.
West Coast poetry, especially.
Yeah, the beats.
West Coast poets.
Kerouac and Snyder, and they got turned on by the old Zen poets of China, writing in the Tang Dynasty, 600 to 800 CE, and those poems. I think this speaks to the question, by the way. Those poems tend to be very concrete. They're about things that someone's seeing, hearing. They're about stuff.
Yes.
They're not fanciful ideas. They're just like you're saying. They're simple. And actually, there was a group of poets in London in the 1910s who called themselves the Imagists.
Yes.
Who the beats were influenced by, and the Imagists were influenced also by these Chinese poets. In fact, they translated a lot of them, and they call themselves Imagists because they recognized that these old Chinese poets weren't constructing elaborate arguments and philosophizing. They would sort of, it was a kind of practical, immediate philosophy in a sense, but built out of images. It was just, can you just convey what the raindrop looks like when it lands on the lake? You know, can you describe, convey the beautiful arc of that little bridge?
Yeah.
Or the presence of that tree? You know, it was this simple things of the world. And actually, this is another congruence with Zen, is that Zen doesn't think that there's a lot of teaching to be done on an abstract way, that we've got masses of sort of things you've got to understand and doctrine you've got to grapple with. None of that. Zen actually thinks that the only teaching is this world and our human life in it and the life of all things. So that's why many of the koans are just about, they're about animals and bridges and trees and plants and sunset and autumn leaves, and trees and losing their leaves. They're just about the things of this world. And that's a real congruence with poetry, isn't it? So, I mean, it's just reminding me really how I took up poetry. I was drawn to poetry because I wanted to find a way to love the world. When I was a kid, in my war-torn skin, in my agonizing, you know, and sort of disfigured life and feeling a lot of shame and stuff, I still wanted to love the world. And poetry showed me a little path, winding path, just expressing the world as it is. You know, that was to love it.
Marvelous.
You know,
Well said.